Okay, so on the topic of reactivity, we have a question here from Pam, and Pam is asking how or are you able to differentiate between a dog who's pulling and barking out of fear versus pulling and barking out of aggression when they see another dog? I've got my own thoughts on this. I'm going to let you sort of take it away, though.
I think what's interesting when people want to bring up fear is, if I say fear, are you going to then go, okay, well, we can't do anything about it because the poor animal's scared? That's the part that I always have had want to know from the client, because we just need to come to the consensus that regardless of why the dog's doing it, we can't have that. This is inappropriate. You can't act that way, whether you're terrified or the dog is, just getting off on the behavior. And so often it's been very rare, Pam, that I've actually seen a truly fear aggressive dog, a dog that said, I'm going to get you before you get me. And that's really what fear aggression is for me, is I'm going to get you before you get me, versus an insecure dog that goes, this has really worked for me in the past. I'm going to lose my mind at something or someone, and I'm going to get flooded with all of this dopamine and maybe adrenaline and all these other things. And you're going to move away, and that's going to be fun for me. It almost becomes a game versus, if you walk straight up to that dog, they might not do anything and they'll actually back away and then bark at you and whatnot. So there are definitely ways to tell. You can hear it in their voice. You can hear it in how fast they're barking, how slow they're barking, in their posture, whether they're pouncing as they're doing it. And typically the most serious dogs will make perfect eye contact, and they will just lock in. And if they are barking, it's this steady, intense, forward motion, head down kind of thing. So there can be a lot of things body language wise. But for me, I go, as a trainer, I go, I'm never 100%. I've got my suspicions, but I'm never 100%. I think that's really important as a trainer. It's okay to not know everything all the time. But if you keep safety as a priority and the outcome, what's the outcome that we're looking for? As long as you're prepared to balance the behavior afterwards, as in, hey, you're not allowed to do this, there's consequences for these actions. But then if the dog is insecure and then stops that outward trajectory of just blah, 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 then you can balance it once they're calm with, hey, the stranger's going to bring you tripe treats and liver and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's an important, I love what you said about, what happens if I say the answer is fear? Like, how does that affect you? Because that is
yeah.
a big concern. One thing that I was going to say here too, and it kind of plays into what you're talking about, is this is a question that I know I get a lot. And this actually just came up with another one of the professionals that I coached the other day as well. A very similar question, not regarding to barking and lunging, but it was a dog who on the walk all of a sudden like just puts on the brakes and is like, nope, not going any further. And she was saying, how do I know if the dog's doing that because he's fearful or because he's just being stubborn? And kind of part of my answer was, does it matter that much? Like right now in this moment, does it matter that much? Because what we have to say is, what is the dog doing, and in what ways can I sort of influence that? Like, so that's why, like, when you were clarifying the behavior, like, what you said is Pam asking when the dog's being reactive. And I said, well, she's asking if the dog's pulling and barking, whatever we want to call that, because let's just focus on the observable behavior of what we see and not worry as much about how we're going to label it. Aggression is like one of these things that if you ask 10 different trainers to define aggression, you're going to get 10 different answers. And it's not even really that there's a right or wrong answer. Even if you ask a behaviorist to define aggression, you might get a different answer than if you ask an ethologist to define aggression, and both could be PhDs. So it's not like a right or wrong thing. It's just, there are different ways we can define that. And so I tend to lean on the more ethology-based definition of it. Ethology, it's a great question, Evan. Ethology is the study of animals in their natural setting. The The more ethology-based definition of aggression, which is the one that I tend to use, again, I'm not saying it's the only right answer, but it's the one that I tend to use, is simply any behavior that is aimed to hurt, harm, injure, or scare away a conspecific. Conspecific generally means same species. When we're talking about dogs, I and many other people will expand that to their own species and humans because they live with us as well. We become part of their families. Right. So hurt, harm, scare away, injure, or kill a conspecific. And in that sense, whether the dog's being dominant or fearful or whatever, we can look at the behavior itself and say, well, what is this? Why is the dog doing this? Unless it's just, hey, I'm frustrated that I'm on a leash. I really want to get to you to play, but I'm frustrated. Like you see some dogs that are on a tether and they see their favorite ball and they're barking because they can't reach the ball. Some dogs will do that towards other dogs, right? I gotta get to that dog and I can't. But most reactivity is what you said. It's a dog who's feeling a little unsure and probably wants that other dog to just keep a distance or go away, right? So they're trying to scare away. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to hurt it or injure it or kill it. In fact, a lot of these dogs wouldn't actually fight if given the chance. They really just want to create distance. But under this definition, that is still considered aggressive behavior.
That's right? Scaring away.
It's scaring away. It's aggressive behavior. Again, I'm not saying it's the only right answer. It's just that's the definition I tend to use. And again, fear is a tricky word because, confidence or lack thereof is a very colorful spectrum. And often when we talk about fear, that often brings us to like one polarity of that spectrum. And so I much prefer to use words like the dog is feeling unsure, the dog is feeling uncertain, the dog is feeling insecure, because it allows for us to understand that your dog might kind of like other dogs, but also feel a little bit unsure about a new dog walking straight on face to face directly at them. You don't really see a lot of leash reactivity that in like dogs that are very confident around other dogs. Where you might see them get reactive is more like on their own property, a more territorial type behavior. And that's where you'll see again that like you mentioned, that kind of like bouncing, kind of very rhythmic barking that you'll get, as opposed to the kind of chaotic barking that you tend to hear with reactivity. Yeah. So it's just not something that we see a lot. It's a tricky concept.
It is tricky. And I think the biggest lesson for dog trainers and pet parents out there that I've learned over the years is don't argue. Is this a behavior consult, or are we trying to actually like move on from this? Because
exactly,
I don't care. I don't care if it's fear, aggression. I don't care, whatever. Don't do that. I can't have you acting this way. I can't take you out in public. It's embarrassing. It's awkward. It's dangerous. I don't want to live this way anymore. So whether it's fear, aggression, or the dog's just blowing up and having a good time, whatever, let's move past it. And you will lose a lot of clients if you go, this isn't fear, aggression, here's why. It doesn't matter. If your goal is, and you can communicate to the person, hey, are you comfortable with making your dog uncomfortable to teach them that you're not allowed to do this, and then rewarding them when they choose a better behavior? Or are you more concerned about your dog just being scared and trying to comfort them even more? Because that's not going to change the behavior. Coddling your dog when they're losing their mind is probably going to get you bit in the face. And as someone who's been bit in the face twice as a child, I can tell you, don't try to hug a dog that's lunging and barking.